I was working as a camp counselor at a remote campground. It's the kind of place you'd go to for peace and quiet. Surrounded by woods and with only a few staff members, it felt like you could escape the world there. What I didn't know was that I was working alongside a monster, and I came very close to becoming one of his victims. This is the story of how I almost became a victim of a serial killer, and how I barely made it out alive. I started working at the camp in June, and for the most part, everything seemed normal. I was one of the counselors who ran the activities: canoeing, hiking, campfires, that kind of stuff. The camp had a small staff, and we all lived on site in these little cabins. I quickly made friends with a guy named Aaron, who was one of the new camp's groundskeepers. He was quiet but friendly enough, and he worked the night shift, keeping an eye on things when the campers were asleep. At first, everything went smoothly. The campers were having fun, and we had a nice routine going. But there were little things that felt off, things I didn't pay much attention to at first. For one, the area surrounding the camp was so remote that even the slightest noise would seem unsettling. The trees seemed to whisper in the wind, and the forest was unnaturally silent at night. Some of the older staff members would joke about how the woods had a life of their own, but I never thought much of it. One night, after the campers had gone to bed, Aaron and I were cleaning up around the campfire pit when we noticed something strange. There was an old abandoned cabin just on the edge of the property, hidden behind some thick trees. I'd never noticed it before. We walked toward it, and as we got closer, I saw that the door was slightly ajar. I asked if Aaron had noticed this cabin before. Aaron didn't respond, but I could tell he was frazzled. We decided to check it out anyway. Inside, it was dark and musty, but the strangest thing was the smell. It was sickly sweet, like rotting meat mixed with something metallic. We carefully stepped further in, using the dim light of our flashlights. The cabin looked old, with broken furniture and dust everywhere, but as I shined my light toward the back of the room, I froze. On the walls were strange, unsettling marks, crude drawings, almost like symbols. And then I saw framed pictures on the wall, photos of past camp employees. Some of them looked like normal group photos, but others were distorted, blurred faces. I felt the blood drain from my face when I recognized one of the blurred faces. It was a counselor who had worked there 3 years ago. She was all over the news when she went missing. She'd mysteriously disappeared, never found. At the time, it was chalked up to her just leaving the camp without telling anyone, but it never made sense. I never knew which camp she went missing from. But to find out it was this camp scared me. Before I could say anything, Aaron pulled me back and whispered that we needed to get out of here, now. We rushed back to the camp, and as we made our way toward the staff cabin, it felt like someone was watching us. I turned around, but there was no one there. The next day felt off. I couldn't stop thinking about the photos in that cabin, especially the one with the missing counselor. It kept nagging at me. Then, on a break, Aaron pulled me aside. His voice was shaking. He told me he went back to the cabin. He said all of them were staff members, but they were all missing persons as well. People who had vanished at this camp. And it wasn't just from 1 or 2 years ago. These disappearances went back to the 80s. I was in shock. Aaron continued that he stayed up all night and hasn't been asleep yet, researching everything. He said he thinks the person is still here since the last one was only 3 years ago. He told me he was leaving, and if I wanted to go, I could come with him. I declined asking him to stay too. I didn't want to leave the kids since it was their last day there, or the other staff members, without telling them and calling officials to come and handle it. We both agreed to tell the other counselors first. Later that night, after all the children left, as I was cleaning, I saw Aaron standing completely still, staring at the other groundskeeper. I walked over to ask him why, but as soon as I walked over to him, he blurted out that Tom was the killer. Tom was the oldest groundskeeper and had been there for many years. I rejected the idea since Tom was old and wouldn't hurt anyone. Aaron told me to trust him, and no one has worked here longer than Tom. I still didn't believe it, but went along anyway since Aaron was so serious. I told him we will confront him after I finish my night shift. I wish I hadn't walked away from Aaron. After I was done, I grabbed the nearest flashlight and decided to confront Tom. As I walked toward the main camp office where Aaron and I were supposed to meet up, I got annoyed at first that he wasn't there. I waited for about 15 minutes and he was still a no-show. The way he wanted to solve this so badly, I knew something was wrong for him not to show up. I continued to stand in front of the office when I heard the door open. I turned around to Tom, just standing there giving me the coldest stare I've ever seen. I asked him if he saw Aaron. He just smiled and said he'll be right back. I questioned whether I should have ran or waited, but he came back with Aaron, holding him up almost. Aaron looked at me, like he was becoming lifeless. He told me it was Tom. Then, within seconds, Tom grabbed Aaron by the throat and shoved him against the door lining. Aaron's breath was ragged, and then, just like that, he was gone. Tom had killed him. I ran. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could, weaving between the cabins and trees, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to make it to the ranger station. It felt like the longest run of my life. I managed to get to a payphone and dialed 911. I screamed into the phone that the groundskeeper is the killer over and over. I told them the address and hung up and kept running. When the authorities arrived, Tom was gone. The camp was closed down, and the rangers started a full investigation. But they never found Tom. There were no traces of him anywhere. Just a few disturbing clues left behind, things that proved Aaron was right. To this day, I don't know how Tom managed to hide in plain sight all those years. Maybe he was a local who knew the area better than anyone. Maybe he blended in by taking the job as a groundskeeper, hiding in the shadows, watching, waiting. But I'll never forget what happened to Aaron, or how close I came to being the next victim. That camp is still out there, but I don't think anyone goes there anymore. And as for Tom, he's still out there, somewhere, waiting for the next opportunity. I've never told anyone this story before, and even now, thinking back on it, I still get this tight feeling in my chest. This happened when I was about 12 or 13. My family had just moved into this new house, and it wasn't like your typical neighborhood kind of house. We were out there, like way out there. We lived in this 2-story house surrounded by woods. No neighbors in sight, no streetlights, nothing. Just trees, dirt, and silence. I had always loved the outdoors, and when we moved there, I kept begging my dad to go camping. I thought it was so cool that we basically had our own forest. I mean, what kid doesn't think that's awesome? For weeks, I kept asking him to go camping with me. Just one night, I told him, but he was always busy and kept delaying it. I wore him down eventually. He agreed to it on a Friday, and we planned to just head out behind our house, like maybe 15-20 minutes into the woods. Not far enough to get lost, but far enough to feel like an actual camping trip. That evening, we packed a tent, sleeping bags, some hot dogs, marshmallows, water bottles, all the usual stuff. My mom wasn't too excited about the idea, but she let us go. She made sure we brought our flashlights and reminded my dad like 5 times to keep his phone charged. It was still light out when we got to the spot we picked. There was this small clearing where the trees opened up just enough to see a patch of sky. You could still kind of see our house way off through the trees, but it felt far enough to feel real. We set up the tent, gathered some wood, and started a fire. It was peaceful. You could hear birds, the wind through the trees, stuff like that. It was everything I thought it was going to be. I remember thinking it was the best night ever. We roasted hot dogs on sticks and made s'mores while the sun went down. As it got darker, the woods around us started to feel different. Not dangerous or anything, just different. We were sitting by the fire, and we kept hearing these little cracks in the distance, like twigs breaking. At first we joked about it, saying maybe it was Bigfoot or some animal. My dad said it was probably deer or a raccoon or something, nothing to worry about. But it kept happening, every few minutes, always from a different direction, first to the left, then behind us, then off to the right. It was never loud enough to sound close, but just enough to make you feel watched, I guess. I was getting scared, but I didn't want to admit it. I was the one who begged to come out here, so I tried to ignore it. My dad was doing the same, I could tell. He kept shining the flashlight around every time he heard something, but he'd laugh and reassure me that it was nothing. Eventually, we decided to head into the tent because it was getting late, and the fire was starting to die down. My dad zipped the tent shut and turned off the flashlight. We laid in our sleeping bags, and for a while, it was quiet again. I don't know how much time passed, maybe an hour, when we both heard footsteps again. Not animal footsteps, not something small rustling in the leaves. Heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps, walking right up to our campsite. My dad sat up fast and reached for the flashlight. He flicked it on and pointed it at the tent wall, but obviously that didn't do much. We couldn't see out, and whoever it was couldn't see in, but they had to know we were in there. We just sat there, not saying anything. I even tried to hold my breath not to make any noise. The footsteps stopped a few feet away, and then the fire went out, like someone kicked dirt on it. We heard the quick hiss of hot embers going cold. My heart was beating so fast I thought I was gonna puke. My dad whispered to stay quiet, but I already was. Whoever was out there knew exactly where we were, and they were messing with us. The scariest part was feeling like there was nowhere to go. If we stay inside, they could come in, and if we go out, they could be right there waiting for us. Then it got worse. The tent started shaking, like someone was grabbing the poles and yanking them, not trying to pull it down, but to scare us, back and forth. Real slow at first, then harder. I thought the whole thing was gonna collapse. My dad suddenly shouted that he was calling the cops and that he had a weapon and wasn't afraid to use it. We didn't have anything, not even a pocket knife, but he said it with so much force that even I believed him for a second. Then, silence. The shaking stopped. The footsteps started again, fast this time, like someone running. We heard them sprint off into the woods, crunching leaves and snapping twigs as they went. My dad grabbed the flashlight, unzipped the tent, and we both just ran. Didn't grab anything. Left the sleeping bags, the food, everything. We didn't stop until we were back in our yard, the porch light from the house finally in sight. My mom opened the door, freaked out, asking what happened. My dad didn't even know what to say at first. He just told her that someone was out there. That's all he could say. I remember her asking over and over who it was and what he meant, but we didn't have an answer. We didn't see anything, just footsteps, just whatever that was. We didn't sleep that night. In the morning, my dad went back out there to get our stuff. I begged him not to go alone, but he said he'd be fine. When he came back, he said all our food was gone. The marshmallows, the hot dogs, the chips, even the water bottles. Gone. The only thing left was the tent, still standing, and the charred remains of the firewood. Like someone had taken everything else and just walked off. There weren't any footprints either. The leaves were still disturbed from when we ran, but nothing else. Nothing that could explain who had been out there. We never camped again after that. Even now, years later, I can't go near those woods after dark. I don't know what we heard. I don't know who was out there. But I know this. They weren't lost. They weren't harmless. They were watching us, and they wanted us to know. My girlfriend and I spent a weekend in the woods with a man who seemed nice at first, but ended up being one of the creepiest people I've ever met. And no, it wasn't a ghost. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. Just my girlfriend Emily and me. We were both looking forward to a quiet weekend camping in a secluded part of a state park, away from the noise and distractions of the city. We found this little campground online. It was small, quiet, and had decent reviews, but not many people seemed to go there. That should have been a red flag, but we were eager to get away from everything. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. The campground was set up in a beautiful spot, surrounded by towering trees, with a peaceful little lake nearby. When we checked in, the host, a middle-aged man named Gary, was the only one at the office. He was pleasant enough at first, a little too eager to talk, and all around annoying. Gary gave us a rundown of the rules, mostly standard stuff. No loud noise after dark, respect the environment, yada yada. He also made a weird comment about the history of the campground. He said it had been in his family for generations, but the way he said it, it almost sounded like he was too attached to the place. It was a small, offhand remark, but something about it made me uncomfortable. Emily seemed to notice it too. That night, things seemed normal. We set up camp by the lake and sat around the fire, enjoying the peaceful surroundings. But when it started to get dark, I noticed something strange. Gary was just standing there, at the edge of the clearing, watching us. I thought it was odd, but maybe he was just checking in on his campers. Still, it felt invasive. I waved at him, but he didn't wave back. He just stood there, like he was waiting for us to notice him. After a few minutes, Emily turned to me and said she felt he was kinda creepy. I agreed. There was something unsettling about the way he was just standing there, motionless, his eyes fixed on us. I told her that if we continued to act normally and pay him no attention, that maybe he would leave, and when I looked back, he was gone. We felt a little better, but it ruined our night, so we left the fire and went back to our cabin. We went to bed, but sleep wasn't easy. The cabin was small, and every creak of the wood or snap of a branch outside made me tense up. I kept hearing footsteps outside, soft, almost imperceptible. I figured it was just the wind, but I also felt that someone was out there, just waiting. The next morning, we decided to go for a hike. When we came back to our campsite, we found that some of our gear had been moved around. Our chairs were a few feet from where we'd left them, and Emily's bag had been opened, though nothing was missing. She looked at me and said she didn't touch anything. I hadn't either. We immediately thought of who it could be. We were both a little freaked out, but tried not to let it ruin the day. We went into town to grab some snacks, but when we came back, Gary was standing near our site again, just watching us from a distance. I called out to him, asking if everything was good around here. He nodded, but his smile looked like he was forcing it. He said he was just making sure we were all settled in, and warned us that the weather had been unpredictable lately. He added that he wouldn't want us to be stuck out there in a storm. I nodded, but something about the way he said it set my nerves on edge. I thanked him and told him we were fine, though I didn't feel fine at all. We didn't see him again for a while, but then, around dusk, we noticed him walking around the campsite once more. This time, though, he wasn't just standing still, he was closer. We could see him pacing, circling the campsite, and even peering through the trees as if looking for something. That's when Emily and I started to feel like we weren't alone in the woods. We both had the growing sense that Gary was watching us, like he knew exactly where we were at all times. I was at my wit's end with him. Finally, that night, I had enough. Emily agreed and suggested that we leave right then. I told Emily we needed to confront him first. We grabbed a lantern and made our way toward his cabin. More like a shack, really. It was tucked away, just a few hundred yards from our site. The closer we got, the more the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. When we knocked, it took a minute for Gary to answer. He looked off. His eyes were wide, his face a little flushed. I told him I knew it was us showing up randomly that could scare him, and asked if everything was okay, pointing out that he had been acting a little strange. Gary smiled again, but this time it wasn't reassuring. It was creepy. He said he was just keeping an eye on things, that people didn't always appreciate how quiet it gets out there. He chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It sounded like a nervous, forced sound. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to escalate things and make him angry, but I couldn't ignore the growing fear in my chest. I came to confront him, but in the moment, I felt like a statue. Emily looked at me, and I could tell she was just as uncomfortable as I was. Finally, after a long, tense silence, Gary stepped back and muttered that if we were all set, we should just remember to be careful out there, because something or someone might get you. We didn't say anything more. We didn't need to. We could both tell that something was seriously wrong with this guy. The way he spoke, the way he watched us. It wasn't normal. We thanked him and left his cabin. We didn't stick around to find out what he was really capable of. We packed up our stuff that night and left. As we drove out of the campground, I looked in the rearview mirror. Gary was standing by his shack again, watching us leave. But this time, I could have sworn his smile was bigger, more sinister. And as we drove down the winding road, I kept thinking about all the other campers who might have stayed there before us. How many of them never noticed the little signs? Or maybe thought they were just being paranoid like we almost did. But there was something much darker about that place, and Gary. This happened a few years ago, but I still can't get over it. It was a camping trip, just me and a few close friends. We've been looking for activities to start as a group, and we thought hiking would be a great start. We were in a well-known national park, one that gets a lot of foot traffic, but it's also huge, stretching for miles and miles of dense forest. The kind of place where you can hike all day and never see another person. We figured it'd be a perfect place for a weekend getaway, just to get away from everything. We started our hike on a Friday morning. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, no rain, just the right amount of chill in the air. We got to the site we planned to camp at, and it was remote enough to feel isolated but still within the park's boundaries. There was a small clearing with a creek nearby, so it felt like a peaceful spot. We spent the first night just relaxing by the fire, telling stories, drinking, and roasting marshmallows. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, just your typical camping trip, until the next morning. Saturday, we woke up early to start a hike. One of the guys, Matt, had suggested we head a bit deeper into the woods, somewhere that wasn't as mapped out. It wasn't like he was familiar with the area, but he had that sense of adventure, the kind of guy who'd take off into the woods without a second thought. We didn't really think twice about it. After all, the park wasn't exactly known for being dangerous. at least not in the way people typically think of wilderness. We started walking, following a faint trail that Matt seemed sure of. As we went further in, it got quieter, way quieter. The sounds of birds and insects seemed to fade out completely. All we could hear were our footsteps, and I swear, it felt like the trees were closing in around us. Every time I looked around, it felt like the forest was different, more oppressive. It wasn't until we were about 2 to 3 miles in when I started feeling off. Matt was ahead as usual, but I had this feeling like I was being watched. I know that sounds cliche, but trust me, it was more than just paranoia. It was a presence. I turned around just to check on the others, and they were all fine. No one else seemed to feel it, but I couldn't shake the feeling. We kept walking, and eventually, Matt decided he wanted to go off the trail and explore some rocks near a small ravine. He asked us to keep going without him while he checked it out. I wasn't a fan of the idea, but I figured it'd be fine. The rest of us continued along the trail and told Matt we'll be waiting for him to catch up, but he never did. We waited for about an hour. I assumed he'd gotten distracted by something, maybe a cool spot or a trail he wanted to explore. But the more we waited, the more afraid we felt. It wasn't like Matt to just wander off for so long without a word. Eventually, we started calling his name, walking back along the trail. We found nothing, no sign of him, no Matt. At first, we thought he'd just gotten ahead of us without us realizing. It happens when you're hiking in thick woods. I knew we all came to that conclusion to soothe us from the fear of not finding him. But the hours ticked by, and there was no sign of him. I knew something was wrong. The forest felt too quiet. Not even the wind was moving the trees anymore. We tried calling out, and eventually, we radioed the park rangers. They were quick to respond, but when they arrived, they seemed concerned. More concerned than I expected. They mentioned that this kind of thing had happened before in that area, people going missing without a trace. The rangers' faces said it all. Something about the whole situation was just off. We spent the next several hours combing the area, even though we had no idea where Matt had gone. The rangers got a helicopter in the air, and search teams combed the ground for days. But no Matt. It wasn't until 4 days later when they found something. They discovered his backpack, just sitting by a small creek a few miles away from the trail. It was placed gently, almost deliberately, by the water. His sleeping bag was inside, his phone, his water bottle, but no sign of him, no footprints, nothing. The strangest part was that no one could find any trace of where Matt had gone. No drag marks, no evidence of a struggle, and no footprints in the dirt. It was like he just vanished into thin air. After a week of searching with no result, the authorities started speculating that Matt had gotten lost, but that didn't explain the backpack. We all thought it was bizarre, but the idea of someone wandering off in a forest that size and leaving their bag behind didn't sit right with any of us. Later, I found out that the park had a dark history, multiple disappearances in the area over the years. A lot of them were never explained, people just vanishing, no bodies, no clues. It was like they were swallowed up by the forest. I've never gone back to that park. I don't know what happened to Matt. I don't know what happened to those other people either, but I do know that something is wrong with that place. Maybe it's the park itself. Maybe it's something more sinister. But all I know is that's a place I'll never return to.